Thank you very much, Dennis, for the invitation. I mean, we have been from the humblest pensions in Brazil, El Pescador, to luxury places like this, you know, together.
It's a long way from the El Pescador, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and the organizer. I mean, it's really an honor to be here with you. I mean, with so many friends and, you know, and after 2.5 years of isolation, I mean, this is just extraordinary.
Yes, that's nice too. That
okay, yeah. Dale. Yeah, Dale, go on.
Okay, can everybody hear me? I just wanted to say thank you to Dennis and Annette and everybody for organizing the conference. And I'm so sorry that I can't be a part of it. You know, the worst part is not meeting all of you and not seeing all my old friends like Monica and Zach and Manolo and Donna. But at least through technology, I can be with you. I'm, you know, also very honored to be a part of this garden for at least 22 years now. And so I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit of, you know, how I got interested in all this plant business and my early life. And then later, I'm going to share with you some of the plants and animals in our garden.
Okay. Right. Can you share the screen? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, Florianopolis, I didn't know where it was, but it was Jean Landon, an anthropologist, who told me you can come here, and I completely fell in love with the place. Just to have an idea, this is in southern Brazil, on the island of Santa Catarina, called Meyembipe by the Tupi-Guarani, and there have been at least 3 different ethnic groups on the island since at least 4,800 years. So here we're getting closer, 27 degrees south. Let me see. And here's Florianopolis. Altogether, it's about 500,000 people now. It's growing very fast. You know? And the Spanish arrived here already in the 16th century. So here we have the Ratones. This is Santa Catarina, the Ratones Island, and it said that it was Cabeza de Vaca who gave the name Ratones because from the distance, they look like mice, you know. This area is part of the Atlantic coastal forest. Unfortunately, deforested because different reasons. I mean, this is the place where, one of the areas of highest biodiversity. Some people even say that even more than the Amazon. With many different ecosystems, but heavily impacted by human activity. First of all, urbanization, then coffee and sugar. We have been drinking, you know, dead forest for hundreds of years, and logging, and then conversion of the forest into pastures for cattle. So now there are something like 7% remaining of that forest. Here's the city, Florianopolis. This is the bridge connected to the mainland. And then we go to the northern part of the island. And this is the peninsula, the Daniela Peninsula. Let's see. Well, okay. Oh, it just went too fast. All right. Okay. Anyway, here is Wasiwaska. No, but I have to go back to show you 2 slides. What happened?
There's a B on there for black on the remote. Don't press the B.
Okay. Okay. I go forward. Next one. Next one. Next one. Oh, but I don't know. Okay. We continue. Okay, so here is Wasiwaska. Some friends of us, among them Allard Tamin, who is here, owns this. This is a little company, and then a Swiss friend owns the house, the next house. So that means that we are very lucky. You know, here Wasiwaska, and we are very lucky that we have altogether about 10 hectares. It's not much, but still, you know. And all this area is tertiary forest. All this was, again, transformed into coffee and sugar and manioc, you know. Because the boats were coming from Europe, all those boats going to the south to the Buenos Aires, went to the Rio de la Plata. They stopped there to be repaired and get, and they, of course, they cut the big trees to repair the boats and so on. So all this area was, the forest that we have now is about only 40 years old. And big patches of invasive ferns, which we hope to repair. Okay, a little bit of story about me very quickly, you know, I don't want. So I was born in Florencia, in the Amazon, in the Colombian Amazon. When I was a child, there was no running water, no electricity, no cars, there were only horses, so on. But this area of Caquetá has been heavily deforested. I mean, it's one of the worst areas in the world, in fact, mostly because cattle and so on. When I was 12 years old, I was sent to a seminar in Bogotá, and I went advanced to the seminary until I was 18. Then I was sent to Spain, and I spent 2 years in northern Spain, where I got my education in philosophy and 1 year of theology. But I left, you know, and I went to Madrid and studied in Complutense de Madrid 5 years. And then in 1971, I met Terence. You know. That was a big change for me, of course. You know. So he spent 2 months, 3 months almost, here in Villa Gloria. There's a little house that my parents have, wooden house. And he was then traveling with Eve. She calls, Dennis and Terence called her Eve. I don't say her name. And then they were, Terence was writing the visible landscaping. I was even helping with the quantification of the itching. Then through a friend, I pity I don't have the photo. It's a German guy who had a restaurant. He had a friend who was Kalman Sabo in Hungarian. And then with Yahe that we got from Apolinar, we took Yahe for the first time. So the globalization of ayahuasca was her. So Don Apolinar had been moving from the area of the Sibundoy Valley. Mark Plotkin is going to talk about that. And then he moved to Yurayaco. And there was forest. In 1971, Terence and I, we went all the way to Belén de los Andaquíes, a little town, but there it was forest. It was impossible to go to see Apolinar in Yurayaco. But anyway, through this chain of German and Hungarian, we got Yahe. And just remind you, Yahe is the combination of Banisteriopsis capi and Diplopterus cabrerano to Malpighiaceae. And then different from ayahuasca, which is with the rubias, with the Psychoactive. All of you know this, of course. Anyway, and Manuel Torres, he made this little chart, more or less, so you know where is the area of use of Yahe between Colombia and Ecuador, ayahuasca, the rest. And in 1973, I went to Berkeley to see Terence. I spent another 2.5 months with him. It was Watergate time, so we spent the evenings watching the Watergate scandal. And but then, so all these books came out about that time. This one even when I arrived, 71. And for I wanted to know, what is this Yahe? I mean, the experience is so extraordinary. I wanted to know more. So I started to get the books that appear. I got in touch even with Rachel Dolmatov. He wrote me a very kind letter saying, if you want to study these things, better study science before you study anthropology, because you will be lost. Okay, well. And he wrote this book with one person, one informant, an Indian who had been to the seminar. He went to the army. He was in Bogota, and then was working with, he made him his assistant. and wrote this extraordinary book that changed, to a great extent, anthropology. Anyway, I moved, was teaching Latin American literature in Oslo, at the same time took several courses in science, but never got a permanent position. So I have to go somewhere, and I went to Finland. So now I'm going to talk about this dream of gardens has been since I met Terence, in fact. And before I came to this conference, I had the idea to go through the many letters that I have from Terence. I have probably about 100 letters. And look at this, well, for the first, they bought a piece of land from my father, a little piece of land, $500, I remember. And so we would go December 17th, with the idea of immediately going to Florencia and trying to determine what land options were open to us. We intend to buy some piece of land and begin immediately to move plants in and establish a living situation. So there was a conflict with Eve, and so she went there to claim the land. But Terence said, naturally, I hope that she will decide to sell her share to me, they both together, since there is nothing for her in Caquetá now, while Eduardo and I still plan to develop the land into a botanical garden as we have planned. In '75, I'm still planning to live and work at Villa Gloria sometime in the future, and we'll write a grant proposal this summer trying to drum up some money for a botanical farm on the land there. However, through mutual friends, I hear that things are getting very bad in Colombia, both on the general political scene and also with regard to foreign travelers, especially Americans. And finally, just in '76, yesterday we arrived in Lima, and tomorrow we will fly to Iquitos. The decision to come directly to Lima and thus bypass Colombia was not made without considerable soul searching. But recent travelers in Colombia indicated the state of emergency, which continues from last July, has made it a possible dangerous place for young Americans in pursuit of local drugs, even yahe. So, and this is the last one. I'm still 77, I still think about the land and have even recently debated about going to Colombia instead of to Hawaii to see the land for myself and to determine if now be the time to build something there. Please tell me if your father is still living in Florencia, is the Villa Gloria, San Antonio, and Florencia much as it was when we were there, or has all changed somehow? These questions are important to me and could even determine the future course of my plans. And so I'm very interested in hearing your opinions. I would still prefer to live on that land than anywhere else in the world. Unfortunately, the political situation was very chaotic. The guerrilla came in. There were people that, family of La Poninar were killed. I mean, it was a mess, and we had all to abandon the plans. And then he went to Hawaii. So there was a moment. Okay, I moved from Oslo to Helsinki. I didn't get a permanent position. And then I went to the Swedish School of Economics. Now it's called Hanken School of Economics. And by chance, these synchronicities are amazing, I got the position that Rafael Casten had in the 30s. And he is the first person who wrote about Natem, ayahuasca, the short name. So he was, having his job just by pure chance. In '79, I went back to Colombia. When traveling to South America, then went to Yurayaco to see Don Apolinar, and took the second time I took yahe. And of course, that was an experience completely changed. Especially is that I realized that I have completely neglected the Amerindian epistemology. I've been educated like all Latin Americans, is thinking Europe, and that's the paradigm. And then find no, there is something else. Okay, Don Apolinar died. I thought to make a film about him. I will go back just to say that. And I was thinking that the leitmotif will be the feet. Don Apolinar and his wife never had wearing shoes. His son, sandals. and then tennis shoes at the end, you know. So 3 generations, unfortunately. Roberto, he was tortured by the army. He was already a drunkard. He have, you know, sing a little bit, you know, and then his grandson, nothing at all. Okay, so he died, and then I went to see Terence, and he told me, go to Iquitos. He had just been into Iquitos. And he gave me several names, and one of them was Don Emilio Andrade Gomez. Terence never met him. And so I met Don Emilio in 1980 and made a film about him. If you can see it in YouTube, Don Emilio and his little doctors is there. I think that this is the very first film on ayahuasca. And it's a little documentary, very poor, but anyway, it was the first. And I was, of course, taking ayahuasca with him all through the making the film and gathering notes. And I gathered so much material that I thought, here I have a possibility for a doctoral dissertation. So, okay, this is the film. And then was Don Emilio who told me, ayahuasca is a doctor, es un doctor, it's a doctor. And Toe is a doctor, Burgmancia. And tobacco is a doctor, and all this. So there was the concept of plantis teacher, which other ayahuasqueros would share. I mean, it was the idea. And so tobacco, Burgmancia, Caliandra, these are all doctors, some doctores. And you get in touch with them. Don Emilio introduced me to Jose Corral, and then I did here we have an example of everything is alive, everything is intelligent. And when we were preparing ayahuasca, the bubbles, Don Jose said, you see, these are people. So everything is animated, intelligence is everywhere, mind is everywhere, and the shaman, like in the last lecture, you know, is the one that communicates with all the biosphere, we call it something. So I did the diet several times. I wanted to learn, and then I wrote my doctoral dissertation, and it was Oke Hulkrans who was directing my thesis. I did it without going to one single lesson, and I defended the thesis before I took any courses. So anyway, but he was. I mean, this only happens in Sweden, I think. Okay, and in '83, I went to Vancouver and met Dennis, and this is my photograph, Dennis. You have been and then it became an adventure. This is Dennis in Florencia, where I was born, you know. And then in 1985, I organized the first international symposium on ayahuasca and yahe, I mean, the whole complex. And that's where I met Manolo and Donna as well in Bogota in '85. This is Guillermo Arevalo, who later became very famous shaman. And we were working then for botanical, we were collecting plants for botanical dimensions, the Terence created with cat. So here's Dennis and I, and then here with Pablo Amaringo. It was Dennis who introduced me to Pablo Amaringo, so all this is connected in a very strange way with the Mckenna. My life has been, you know, so. And collected plants, and it was through Schultes that I was able to take those plants to Hawaii, because of course the police wanted to take them away. But Schultes called me once to Helsinki and said, "I'm sending you a magic carpet, you know." So what is? And it was this one. Yeah. So this is Terence and Kat and the children in Hawaii when I went there to deliver the plants that we have collected. Oh. Okay, this, Terence. All right. Okay, pity, doesn't matter. Dennis introduced me to Pablo. Pablo was doing this kind of very cheap paper and watercolors. And I said, Pablo, you have a good memory. He said, I remember everything I have seen. Eidetic memory. And so I said, do you remember? He had been a vegetalista, but he had abandoned, didn't take ayahuasca any longer. So I asked him, do you remember what you saw when you were on ayahuasca? He said, yes, I remember. So this is the first one. Dennis has the second one. I don't have here the photograph. But anyway, this is the beginning of the visionary art. You know, I took this to Helsinki and asked what are these elements, and he wrote a big description, and it was the beginning, you know, of a collaboration of years. Ayahuasca, chacruna, the effects of both, and the spirits associated with each of them, and so on. The spirit, las madres de las plantas, the mothers of plants, or the owners of plants, and so on. So it's a whole mythology and knowledge extraordinary. This is a mestizo. His mother spoke Quechua. So, in Campana ayahuasca, this is Curupita guianensis, your plant. We got a Curupita just a few days before I came here, and so on. And okay, so some examples of Pablo's art. And we put it together in this book that came out in '91. And I have some of the paintings there. And I have 3 paintings by chance. I'm going to have an exhibition in Helsinki. I have them with me, but I cannot display them because they're very valuable and I don't have any frame or something like that. Anyway, but Pablo and I, we created a school of painting. I will not go into that, but anyway, the interesting thing is that he was teaching the kids the same technique, you know, his eidetic memory. He was teaching them never to copy from anything, but go to the forest, see the forest, you know, get all this knowledge of the plants or animals in detail, and then create something in their minds and put it on the paper, just like that. They never made sketches. Pablo never sketched anything. He was just all direct. He was able to work with 3 paintings at the same time to save color, put the red here and the thing here and then here, you know, like this. I mean, it was just like he had a perfect vision. And he was teaching this to the students. And it's amazing, you know, the result of that school. So it was a moment that at the end we have 300 students. All it was free, and okay, so of course now we go back to the garden. So I thought we have to have a botanical garden, and we bought a piece of land. The school bought a piece of land, and here look at the knowledge of they had, you know, of these kids. You know, it's just amazing. This is the ficus. I don't remember the name of the bird. And so this is going to the forest, observing everything, and we created the Jardín Ethnobotanico Chuyachaki, which is a spirit, has the feet backwards. And it is from here that I took the plants to Hawaii, okay? So some of the plants there are from this basket. But unfortunately, Sendero Luminoso, the Shining Path, the guerrilla came asking for money. We have to abandon the garden. But then another garden was created with Francisco Montes, who is Pablo's cousin, a friend of Dennis and Terence already for years before, and who became a painter as well, and a shaman, of course. But Sachamama, the botanical garden close to Iquitos, still is there, and it's fantastic. Okay. And I had the idea to send 14 kids of the Pucallpa school to Iquitos, and each of them had to make a portrait of one plant. And we had this, the last exhibition that I organized was in Washington at the Capital Children's Museum. This is pepillana, you know, the Psychotroph pepillana, which is sometimes used also as an admixture plant to ayahuasca. Okay. Let's see. Okay, Dale, now your turn.
Okay. If you go back 2 slides.
They're not there, I don't know.
They're not there.
No. This one, here. 85, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, but it's not showing.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Does the next one work?
No, didn't work. Okay, pity. Anyway.
Okay, it doesn't matter, Luis. I can begin Just with my early life, I'm South African, and I grew up in Johannesburg, which is a city, and I spent most of my time trying to escape the city. I would go out into the bush to catch snakes and to collect plants. So after school, in my early 20s, I went to work in an area called Hoedspruit, which many of you would know as the Greater Kruger National Park area. I got a job as the curator of herpetology, where I was studying snakes and reptiles and frogs. And I also, worked in this time in many of the game reserves around there. And so I considered this area, my playground in terms of exploring nature. And it was during this time that I got interested in psychedelics. I had a house, and many friends would come down on the weekends and bring little goodies along. And I can really say it's through these kind of experiences that it really deepened, both my understanding and my appreciation for nature. And I think, one of the main uses of these plants in traditional culture is precisely that, to gain a deeper understanding of the natural world. So after the Kruger National Park, if you can move to the next slide, I'd followed a girlfriend to a place in South Africa known as Rustler's Valley. And Rustler's Valley is kind of in the interior of South Africa, but it's on the border between South Africa and Lesotho. And this was a farm which was set up by a man called Frick Grobler, a lawyer, and a couple of his friends. It was originally an asparagus farm, farming asparagus for Marks and Spencer's to be sold in Europe. But when that failed, it was decided that we would work together to produce music festivals. So in the early days, I was a DJ, I was DJ Ethnobot, and we also held various music festivals and workshops at Rustler's Valley. And it was kind of in my late 20s, so I would say about 26, 27, when I came to Rustler's. And strangely enough, Dennis, Terence Mckenna had been visiting Rustler's Valley. I hadn't heard of him at the time, but I was very interested in what was going on. And it's through Terence, who told Luis Eduardo Luna that he should come and have a look at this farm in South Africa, that I came to know Luis Eduardo Luna, and to get involved with the garden at Rustler's Valley. If you could go to the next slide.
Yeah, but okay, Bill Mollison. Right, okay. No?
Luis, are you on the next slide?
Yeah, I don't know which is the next slide because you have not said next slide. I don't know. Okay, here we are in the Sangoma Valley.
Right, okay. So in Rustler's Valley, the valley adjacent to it was a place that I got to know over the years, and it was called Mautse Ancestral Valley. And it was always, regarded in some kind of mystery. But over the years, I started venturing over the mountains, and I was probably one of the first white visitors to that valley. And during that time, I got to meet one of the traditional healers over there, Sangoma, who was known in English. Her English name was Monica. or Nontobeko Mckenna. And she was a Zulu Sangoma and a Mandao prophet. She was highly regarded for being an expert in treating mental patients. And she often did this with the use of psychoactive plants. For example, a plant known as Bufane destica, one of our bulbs here in South Africa, she would describe it as her telescope that she used to bring things that were far away in the future close to her where she could see them. And so Monica lived in a set of caves in these mountains together with her initiates, her twazas. And in this photo, you can actually see they're preparing a mixture of a mildly psychoactive brew, which is beaten with a stick, and it produces a frothy substance. It's full of saponins, and this produces a light state of trance. Monica was considered a master of trance. She could go into many different kinds of trance. And the purpose was really to get in contact with her ancestors. So in Matsi, you know, this place which was very, very formative in my understanding both of plants and of traditional healing in South Africa, you know, the valley was visited by many different tribes of Sangoma. So there were Zulu and Xhosa and Sotho. So it was such an opportunity to witness all the different healing traditions in one place. It also served as a kind of rural hospital. There were many patients that came there for healing. And it also served as a place, you know, where the initiates would come to apprentice. And then many people would come, you know, purely to be in contact with their ancestors. Because it was believed that, you know, once you die, your ancestors return to those mountains. So people came as a kind of sanctuary to be close to their ancestors. So then in 2007, we had the second of a ravishing fire that went through our valley. All our houses, all the infrastructure was burnt down. Most of us lost everything. And it was really at this time that, you know, I was liberated to go and travel, and then moved to Indonesia, where I lived for several years. And I continued to carry on with my studies in plants and also in the animistic cultures of Indonesia. It's such a fascinating place. And during this time, I even met up with Zach Koolberg, who I believe is talking at the conference. And we spent several months crossing Borneo together, also looking at all the plants.
All right. Okay, so this is the beginning of Wasiwaska. I had this crazy idea, no money, very little. I was already living in Finland, and I came and I want to build this thing, you know. But so it took many years. We have to take down the tower, you know, because it was wrong. But anyway, with patience, and so we finally got the house, and Pity is not there, but we have the advisory board. Many of you are here, you know. The advisory board, many of you have been to Wasiwaska. So, I mean, to be here is just like for me a drink, you know. So, so this is the Wasiwaska. We organize 2-3 seminars per year, only for very few people. Now with the pandemic, only 7 to 9 people, plus three guest speakers. And in fact, the next one we are going to have is very soon, June 14, with Monica Edefresca and Mauricio Tolosa. The photo is not there. Okay, so we're going to talk about the garden. So, of course, a garden is a work in progress, you know. And in fact, it was, I think that it was the pandemic is not working, and this should be a film. Okay, now a little bit. It was thanks to the pandemic that I was able to have 2 years in one place just watching the plants. seeing the cycles, you know. So it was a blessing because I was traveling all the time. I came, you know. So finally, I was able to go through the thing. Nowadays we have about, Dale said 400 species. Probably, I mean, photograph and identify, we have about 260 now, right now. But there are more, of course, that we have to. And of course, we began with the ayahuasca. So I have friends in the Acre, and then we were thinking what will be best to get, the piece, the stem, or the seeds. And they would say, no, better the seeds. So we got the seeds, Dale got them to germinate, and fantastic to see the whole process, you know. And so, Dale, I think that, in one of the seminars I told the people, okay, you take one plant and put it somewhere. We ended up having 4 ayahuasca in the center of what was going to be the garden. They grows enormously, so we have to, you know, take them from the root, put it somewhere else, and in fact, the Banisteros can be huge. When I was in the 90s, I was with the Barquilla Church, and this is one plant, 600 kilos, one plant. And probably they didn't take, I mean, they harvest, they would not take the whole thing. So okay, Dale, you continue.
Right, thanks, Luis. So as Luis was saying, you know, when you grow Banisteriopsis carpi, it gets absolutely huge. It takes up a lot of space and a lot of light. And, you know, knowing that there is this, I don't like the term, but globalization of ayahuasca, we really need to cultivate it. You know, it's becoming rare in the wild, and, you know, it's also, it's a valuable plant in so many regards, not only commercially. So I've looked at some experiments and agroforestry systems where I've experimented growing this plant. So the first thing you need is you need a host species or a host tree. So I've experimented with 2 of our local species from the forest. The one on the left there is a species of Enterolobium, and the one on the right is called Guarapavu or Schizolobium. And that's a tree found throughout the Amazon and the Americas, which Indians use for building canoes. Okay, both species are very, very fast growing, which is a characteristic you want. They're both legumes, which means they harbor bacteria on their roots, which feed the plants around them. And you also want trees that are flexible, because when you've got the supported vines, you know, there's a lot of weight, and if you have heavy winds, if your tree is too brittle, they'll break. So I've experimented using associations of these plants. Now, what's very, very interesting is that both species kind of respect each other and they build up a relationship. Because I use plants that are deciduous, meaning that they only have their leaves in summer. And in the wintertime, they totally lose their leaves, allowing light in for other species. But it could easily happen that the Banisteriopsis vines could cut out the light of the other species, but this
We lost the sound?
Might be his internet.
His internet? Okay, well, okay, I can say a little bit. So the 2 plants respect each other. They keep go in, you know, inside each other, and it's perfect. I've been following because we didn't believe in the beginning. I mean, the vine will kill, of course, the Guarapuvu, but you know, still every spring, the Guarapuvu came out. You know, when lost the leaves, the vine go around it, and then again. So and this is going on now for several years, and very important. it produces a lot of biomass. Both the ayahuasca and the garapubu produce a lot of biomass. So that you have like in every, you have an island of very good soil around it. So can you imagine, this is a way to reforestate, pastures, abandoned pastures in the Amazon with fast-growing trees, putting these, like islands, and then in between you can have fruit trees, etc. And this can be productive financially as well, for the local people. So. Okay, now it was you mentioned the varieties of Banisteriopsis. There are many. The Indians recognize many. Every indigenous tribe, they have their own taxonomy. So for a botanist, it is just the same thing. The same thing in Banisteriopsis capi. But even we have a big difference. Like this one, the UDV, they call this one tucunaca, and this is kaupuri with these nodules. So that is a big difference. I noticed, nobody, I don't think the people have not realized that what Spruce was talking about. Oh, sorry. No. Okay, sorry. It's okay. Perfect. Okay. So what Spruce was talking about was the kaupuri. Okay? And now Dale has been doing very interesting observations. Here, this is the tucunaca, this is the kaupuri, which is darker. Look at the glands. The kaupuri glands are bigger than the tucunaca. And so we begin to, well, that's Dale's idea, that is probably a different species, In that case, we have to change everything because then Spruce was talking about, not about, if we call the Spruce Banisteriopsis capi, we have to change the name to the ayahuasca, all the ayahuasca, not any longer Banisteriopsis capi, something else. Okay. And now Dale has been doing experiments. He hybridizing them? Yeah, so because the tucunaca, the kaupuri contains more harmine, much more harmine, like 6 times more than the tucunaca. But the kaupuri produces a lot of vomiting, nausea, all this. So by hybridizing the two, perhaps we can get a plant that is high in harmine but doesn't produce all these things. So these are experiments that Dale is carrying out. And this is the hybrid, with the nodules, but still, Okay. Now, Dale observed that in the forest, there are many Malpighiaceae in our forest, many Malpighiaceae, not studied, so there is a beautiful work for somebody, as a botanist, just to catalog and study the Malpighiaceae from that area of the Atlantic forest. Okay, of course we have Psychotria. Very easy to cultivate, really. We had, I got 17 plants, I think, and now they have babies, and the birds are taking out, so it's going to be some part of the, but in that area, and here what you're saying about this, very important, in Iquitos, they say that the stronger it is, the Psychotria. Anyway, I suppose it will be interesting, Glenn. And Dale found in the forest Carthaginensis growing there locally. So it's another work we're going to do, try to collect as much as possible from the island. Okay, and then thanks to Dr. Dennis, we have now Diplopterus cabrerana from 2 little sticks. Now we have everywhere. It's fantastic. This is the yahe. This is the yahe plant, and it's almost seems like it likes to be harvested, because you take the leaves and again and again. It's just extraordinary. So, and then of course, and then we started to. This is Calliandra angustifolia, not Calliandra pentandra, but anyway, it's beautiful. They call it. In Peru, they call it Ancorissatia and bovinsana. And Don Emilio was telling me that the spirit of this plant, that this is like a castle, a love castle, and for the prince and the princess, because it flowers all the time. You know, it's just, yeah. Okay. And then we have, of course, Brugmansia, which is easy to get, the white, and now we got the yellow one and the pink one. And then we have, okay, this is the Suaveolens. And as you know, it was used for divination, again, persecuted, you know, because they said they use them to cure persistent illness. Either they get healthy or die with it. It is also used to become maestros and learn the art of witchcraft. The idea of plant teachers is right there, okay? Okay, I did field work in the Sibundoy. Mark is going to talk about that, but anyway, in the Sibundoy Valley, they are the experts of the Brugmansians, and here is the Culebra borrachero, the Brugmansia. It was called by Schultes Betisticodendron amesianum, and then he renamed it. Was renamed Brugmansia aurea nowadays. And okay, so this is the Suaveolens and Toe, and then we got recently Datura inoxia. We have to plant it again and again, but it's easy. And then this is our jewel. This is Brugmansia aurea, and what happens? Okay, what a pity. Okay, well, we go back. You know, I don't know what is happening with the photo. Pedrito Huajiboy. When I was in the Sibundoy Valley, I met Pedro Huajiboy, who Schultes photographed in this. He made this photograph holding the Brugmansia aurea, and then I went back to Pedro and then did nearly the same photograph. So this is the Brugmansia aurea. It's absolutely amazing. It has flowered 6 times in 1 year. But we had it in flower a month ago, and now, before I left, you know, we are going to have another 40 flowers, you know. And extraordinary scent, and attracts, what happened? I see, okay. It attracts a lot of insects. And Dale made a very interesting observation. I want him to say it. Okay? The difference is in the leaves. You see, this is a normal Brugmansia leaf. These are the aurea. And the Schulte said that they can be 25 centimeters. In Wasiwaska, we have 50 centimeters long leaves. Beautiful. Dale, are you there?
No, not yet.
Okay. Okay, I better let him know. Tell you.
He's not ready yet.
No? Okay, well, this is the normal Brugmansia, and this is the Brugmansia aurea. And made the observation there, these spiders that he has been observing the bees go there to the Brugmansia and get stoned somehow, you know, and then the spider is the chance, you know. And now this spider changes color according to the flower. Perfect mimesis. And of course we have the Nicotiana, tobacco, Nicotiana rustica, pity. Dale should be talking now, because this is a tobacco that he made with the Wasiwaska tobacco, and it was good. Yeah. And then we have Ololiuki, the Ribera corimbosa. You can get it in Brazil. There are people who have it in the garden, you know, but one has to be extremely careful because it's quite invasive. You know, so we had a wall, and I don't know, 100 meters of this Ololiuki. You know, extraordinary. Produces a lot of seeds, and so one has to be very careful. And then the Argyria nervosa from India, I think, you know, related. The shape of the flowers is about the same. And of course, morning glories and so on. So we have that side. Then we got kava kava. Somebody gave it to me. But it's very similar to a species that grows there in that area. So in fact, nearly identical. So it will be interesting to see to see what it contains. But apparently, it has been used for the production of MDMA. Synthetic. The one that we have in the month, not this one. So. And okay, this is the leaves. And then Dale has been doing very interesting experiments. As you know, peyote grows very, very slowly. Then he had been grafting it onto San Pedro cactus. And very fast, it grows very fast, produces flowers. Now we have seed, peyote from the seed, etc. So very easy. So this is something, I don't know, that has to be given to the, to the Native American church or the people interested in peyote, because this is a way to produce large quantities, So. Okay, and as you know, peyote has been used, for thousands of years. There is plenty of evidence. And it was in 1620 it was declared diabolic, and it was a crime comparable to cannibalism, and could be executed for that. Then we have the two anaerantheras. We have Anaeranthera peregrina and Anaeranthera colubrina. Our colubrina is now about 18 years old. I mean, it's fantastic to see it from. And now it's about 10 meters high, And the peregrina grows very, very fast. So we have peregrina, which are 2 years. This is about 2 years only, so very fast. And of course, the Manolo didn't show his own, the area of the peregrina and the colubrina, and are even. I don't know what happens with the. I don't know what is happening with the slides. Sorry. Okay. So now it's Dale's, and he has not been back.
No, not yet. He's going to call imminently, but not yet.
Because he has to. 1 minute.
1 minute. We're getting that.
All right. Okay. I wait. We have been rehearsing, So, but South Africa is a mess right now. Oh yes, please. Yeah. I think that Dale and I, we are going to do it again and send the file, okay? Because. Okay, all right, okay. Yes, we could do that. Okay.
Thanks.
No, it's okay.
Yes. So we're back again.
Dale, you are with the monkeys now.
Okie doke. So Luis gave you a bit of an introduction to our Anadenanthera trees.
Yes.
The biggest ones we grew probably about 16 or 70 years ago. But around about 3 years ago, something very peculiar happened. These little monkeys, which are a species of marmoset, known as sagui in the Guarani language, they're originally from a part of northeastern Brazil, a much drier area known as the Cerrado. But they were brought to the southern part of Brazil and our island through the pet trade, and now there are lots of them. So these monkeys are, regarded as being remarkable amongst primatologists for their very complex social behaviors. Their communication consists of whistling and various noises, but these very particular facial gestures, which make them, of course, very, very cute. So these monkeys normally eat fruit and insects, but they also have a habit of feeding on latex, and they are known as gummivores. So I noticed about 3 years ago, even though these trees had always been there, that these monkeys would come and bite into the bark and feed on this. And I had no longer noticed them doing this on our Anadananthera trees when I noticed that they started targeting all the other species in the garden that were high in tryptamines. So they then moved on to the acacias, and from there they moved on to our Durama trees, Mimosa tenuiflora. And I really started wondering, are the monkeys getting anything out of this? And it's very difficult, to say. But I do notice that they become extremely excited in this ritual of visiting these trees. And although, some of you might be saying, if there are tryptamines, they wouldn't be orally active. But I can say two things on that. When I look at DMT and tryptamines in various plant species, I'm always aware that they're part of a much broader metabolome. Tryptamines are endogenous to us. We also find them in plants, but always associated with either precursor chemicals or degradation products. And, sometimes in the legume family, it's quite often that you get tryptamines and beta-carbolines or monoamino oxidase inhibitors together. Though another thing happens in plants. For example, the Anadananthera, you get very high levels of quercetin, which is a flavonoid in the bark. And, these flavonoids also directly inhibit monoamino oxidase, which in humans and monkeys is a flavin enzyme. So, inhibition doesn't really have to occur through the substrate. There are substances that directly interfere with monoamino oxidase. So it was peculiar to find these monkeys going through all our plants. And I even started putting up balloons and mirrors to try and deter them because they were attacking our plants. Yeah, and this worked for about a month. Then later I realized that it must be some kind of relationship because, the trees are still there and they're not damaged. But then I noticed that in the surrounding forest, which is really a very rich area botanically for tree species, the monkeys would only go for these tryptamine-rich species, except for one other tree, which is known as Porcelia macrocarpa. And this tree belongs to the Ananaceae family. And I'm definitely going to have a look at this because, this family has recently, in the last 10 years, shown to have some new and unique tryptamines in it. Okay, then next slide. Then I just wanted to leave you guys with this. When I was leaving Sao Paulo, I visited a garden that was right in the center of the city near the Museum of Modern Art, called Jardim Paulista. And I noticed that in this garden there was a plaque showing that the garden had been built in 1927. And I wanted to show you guys at the conference, and especially Manolo, this amazing specimen of what is either an Anadananthera peregrina, or it's possibly even an undescribed species, but it's a truly massive specimen. and I found very, very large seeds of this species, and it was labeled Anadenanthera peregrina. Back to Luis.
All right. So of course, we are collecting medicinal plants or plants which are medicinal and also can be used, have many uses in the food or even in body painting. So we had Bisha orellana. We didn't have the Jenipapo, the Jenipapo, the Jenipa americana, which produces this, the black paint, you know. So now we got tiny little specimen. We had another plant that we thought it was Jenipapo, and then in flower it was not. So, and then okay, Dale, you can continue with the Catarines Tabernanta Montana, I think.
Okie doke. So in our garden, we're lucky to have many, many medicinal plants. I can't tell you about all of them because of time, but some of the ones that are more interesting and some of the ones that we use regularly, we grow them in our garden to drink and take ourselves. This is a plant which occurs, back again. Tabernae montana, which is a native to our forest. Gets beautiful jasmine-scented flowers, and it's a relative of iboga from Africa. It contains vocangine and conaridine, which can be used as precursors to make iboga. But I got interested in this plant largely because it's a famous medicine of the Indians. And it's probably the most famous plant in South America in neutralizing snake venoms. And there are many studies to show that it neutralizes some of the most terrible venoms, the bothrops, etc. Next slide. One of the plants that we grow is possibly one of the most famous medicines in Ayurveda. It's known as Ashwagandha. The main chemistry of the plant, the withanolides, are this group of very interesting chemicals known as lactones. You might know lactones, a good example is ivermectin, which is a natural product that comes from a soil bacteria. But these lactones have very broad spectrum and interesting properties. So ashwagandha is very important as a neuroprotective plant, very important in Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases. It's a tonic plant. It's very good for your immune system generally. It's also one of the plant with the most studies in terms of cancers. It's the roots that are used. If we go to the next species. And a very interesting plant from Southeast Asia, Andrographis paniculata. We grow this. In Indonesia and Southeast Asia, this is our mainstay against dengue fever. And Andrographis is very well studied in being a very potent antiviral agent. It both interferes with viral entry, and then it also has proteolytic enzymes that interfere with the replication of these viruses. So this is a very good plant to know about at these times. It has very broad spectrum antiviral activity. We also use it as an antibiotic against bacterial infections. Then we also grow several species of gingers. On the left, you can see turmeric. Turmeric is a very strong protective medicine for the liver. What a lot of people don't know is curcumin is also an inhibitor of monoamino oxidase. Also has lots of antioxidants. Then we also grow moringa, you can see on the left. And this is a plant which has really made a huge difference in Africa In terms of nutrition, the leaves are very, very rich in minerals and nutrients. They're delicious. They have a horseradish kind of flavor. And on the right here, you can see a plant which is famous throughout the tropics, both in Africa and in the Americas. It is known as Guinea or Kamu or Amaru,
Mkura.
Pumuru. And in the Amazon, it's regarded as a very important anti-cancer medicine. I use a lot of it because it's a very potent antimicrobial. You can use it instead of antibiotics. Strongly anti-inflammatory as well. And then local to our area, we get these species of Clitoria. On the left is Clitoria brasilensis. And then on the right, we get a very important medicinal plant sacred to the Balinese, known as Clitoria terniata. And it's a plant with quite strong antidepressant effects in the leaves, but we use it to make eye drops. And throughout Southeast Asia, you'll find many of the foods are actually this bright blue color. Because they're infused with the flowers during their cooking. And then our forests are surrounded by these beautiful vines of the genus Mckenna, named after the Mckenna Indians. And they produce these very long, elaborate chandelier-like flowers. Next slide. And after flowering, they produce these beans. They're also known as the hamburger beans. And these beans have the ability to cross water and even oceans. So they often end up growing up on distant beaches and germinating. Then moving on, in southern Brazil, we really are in a biodiversity hotspot for orchid species. There are many species that grow on the ground, but also many epiphytes that grow in the trees. So we grow a lot in our garden, mostly for aesthetic reasons, because they're so beautiful and they produce these long-lasting flowers. So these are just two that are from our local forest. Brasileia purpurata, and then the one on the right was a vanilla. This one over here is Cryptopodium flavum. It's one of the ground orchids. I collected several hundred meters away from the house several years ago. And then we grow a lot of hybrid orchids. These are the Phalaenopsis, the moon orchids from Indonesia. And we have lots of them growing on as epiphytes in our trees. Okay, next slide. Then we also started a few years ago a small collection of Nepenthes. And this is a genus of very interesting plants that I fell in love with when I lived in Indonesia, because there's so many species from there. And they're very interesting in that they grow in very nitrogen-poor environments, and they've involved all kinds of ways of catching insects in order to grow. Some of them have even evolved to become more vegetarian, like this one on the right here, which is Nepenthes ampullaria, that feeds off mostly dead leaves. I don't have a photograph, but some of them in Indonesia have pictures over 2 liters in diameter. Then in our local forest, I'm always discovering new things. So I believe a year ago, I stumbled across this beautiful heliconia, which is a bit of a mystery to me because the closest species is Heliconia baia, but this particular specimen has flowers that seem to be too large to key to that species. Then on the right, this is an unusual flower. It comes from the Peruvian Amazon, and this is Aristolochia gigantea. The Aristolochias are important medicines to the Indians throughout the Amazon. But a word of caution, the difference between a poison and a medicine is the amount, and some of the Aristolochias contain quite strong toxins. Next slide. Then lastly, our forests are characterized by, several genera of trees, that when they come into flower, they really set the forests alight. And one of those families is the Melastomaceae, which you can see here. They have pink and purple flowers. The species on the left is Tibicina mutabilis, and mutabilis refers to this color change of the flowers. They start off white, and after a couple of days, they change to this pink color. Back to you, Luis.
Yes, the mutabilis is right now in flower. I mean, it's just spectacular. Okay, and then here we have Ceiba pentandra. It was planted by Adriana's, my wife's father, and this is about 15 years old. But this can be gigantic. I mean, this is still a very small tree, compared to what it will be beautiful flowers. And it produces these seeds, the cotton, one seed inside, and they can blow long away. So we have, if we abandon this place, this will reforest the whole thing, because we find them everywhere. There is a beautiful story about, I don't know about the Mckenna, but in Peru I heard that this is associated with both male and female because it grows a belly, after years, and then it has, they say, like a hymen, so that when there is a lot of liquid, it will break the hymen and make the sound of the jaguar. So, and this is supposed to be the connector between the worlds, and I think that in Mesoamerica, extremely important. I think that in every plaza you have a ceiba, and the Spanish cut the ceiba and then put it, across there. What happened now? Look at this. This is many years ago. This is a ceiba, lupuna, which is very important for the Indians, for the mestizo, and even for the churches. The lupuna is a very important tree. It can be gigantic. I don't know how many. And then here you have the mark of the water, of the winter, when the flooding of the Amazon. All this can be underwater. And of course, very important in the mythology, and well, in the philosophy or whatever of the Indian and the mestizo. And this is a painting by Pablo Amaringo. Here is the shaman inside. His feet are like the hands of the armadillo. I mean, the claws of the armadillo, because it makes, so it's associated with the earth, the rayfish with the water, also the anaconda, both, and then the macaw with the sky. So this depicts that this shaman is able to travel in all these dimensions and go in. Okay, but. And of course, we have the coffee, cacao, still very small. Hope to have fruits perhaps in 3 years or 4 years. And then the mate. We have mate, Ilex paraguinensis. Okay, bromelias, Dale.
Right. So again, southern Brazil is a biodiversity hotspot for bromelias. We don't even have to grow them. When I came to Brazil, I was totally amazed to find them everywhere. They even grow on all the electricity cables. They grow on TV aerials. And we have very many beautiful species in our area. This one here is Bulbergia alfonso johansi. Next slide. This is Bulbergia distica, and the one on the right is Achmea nudicornis. Next slide. And then the forests, you know, surrounding Wasiwaska, we get our rainfall both in winter and summer. So we get many species of mushrooms. I eat a lot of them that I can identify, like this pink oyster mushroom, pleurotus. And then I was also curious to see a mushroom that I know from Indonesia because it's an important medicine and a food in Indonesia. This is Dictyphora indusiata. And throughout Southeast Asia, you can buy these mushrooms normally dried in shops, and they're used both for food and medicine throughout Southeast Asia. The English name is the basket stink or horn. And then going back over 20 years ago when we first started our garden, you know, our garden is a broad collection of medicinal plants, but we specifically tried to collect fruit species and especially some of the lesser known fruit species. And initially our garden was started as a collaboration between myself and Luis and Adriana, and in particular, Adriana's father, Geraldo, who I'll never forget. And we planted a lot of the early fruit trees in the property, which are now, of course, mature and giving lots of fruit. So apart from all the regular fruits like mangoes and bananas and papayas and guavas and lychees, we have a collection of some of the lesser known and rare fruit species. Our forest is made up of the guava, has many, many representatives of the guava family, the Myrtaceae. And many of them are poorly known, but most of them have excellent fruits. So on the left here, you can see Jabuti Kaba, which is excellent fresh. You can make it into jams, and they even make a local wine out of it. In the middle, you can see a very rare fruit, also known as the Brazilian cherry or grumishama. It's rare because most of its habitat, original habitat being Sao Paulo, has been totally destroyed. And on the right there is a fruit called pitanga or Barbados cherry. Produces a very nice, highly aromatic fruit. Next slide. And then also local to our forest, we find this species called Passiflora alata, which has really, really rich, delicious fruits. And I'm collecting the Passifloras. I like to grow them because they've got such beautiful flowers. Excuse me, some species are also used medicinally. And then another family that we collect is the custard apple family, or the Annona family, which are important both medicinally and as food. And on the left here is one of the hybrids that we grow, which is superior to both its parents, Annona squamosa, hybridized with Annona cherimola. And on the right is one of the big soursops. Here you can see a fruit originally from the Peruvian Amazon. It's a solanum known as narangilla or louis louis, and it produces these fruits that have a very, very strong kiwi fruit flavor. On the bottom right is an unusual melon that comes from the forests around Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, and it's known in English or Spanish as casa banana. And it produces these very interesting melon-shaped fruits that have a very, very strong perfume. Okay, next one. And this is a photograph of kind of a cross-section through our agroforestry. Our agroforestry is about 5 years old now. Before, there was nothing except invasive pine trees over there. And so over 5 years, you know, we're seeing some of the species mature. And we're starting to get production out of them, a lot of delicious fruits. Okay. And I just put this slide in because, you know, our garden is a whole learning process. I grow some things purely to learn about them. And this is teosinte, which is an ancestor from maize. It's currently described as Zea maize subspecies parviglumus, but it's believed to be one of the ancestors of maize from the Mesoamericas in Mexico. The next slide.
Yeah, and then we have the birds. And I mean,
Luis, do you want to say something about the birds quick?
yeah, just the birds around the house, and I will give them to you. All right. So this is Chalalaca in Peru. You know, extremely loud. They come in 6 or 7 of them in the morning. I mean, it's a whole orchestra. You know, very very loud, and in the evening as well. So we have a lot of the Graya Azul. They come also 4 or 5 of them at the same time, 10 minutes, okay? And then Saracura, this is from the internet. I was never able to get the Saracura. So, and then in my window, they came to my office, the pica-pau, they called, you know, what is it in English? The woodpecker, in my window. But with the many plants that are coming now, more species of birds are coming. Sometimes we hear something that, what is this? You know, we go out into the garden trying to find very often small birds, very difficult to photograph. But anyway, it's amazing, you know, the number of new species that are coming, you know, through the years. Okay, they'll tell you, okay, and you know, okay.
Okay.
Okay, this one.
You know, throughout.
It's better.
In the garden, and especially around in some of the big trees that we have growing around our center, we get 2 species of vultures. This one is known as the Brazilian turkey vulture. And I always, when I see them, I think that they're looking at me to see how much meat I've got on my body. But they're known for their excellent sense of smell. They can smell carcasses from literally kilometers. And if you look closely at the head, they have a window through their nostrils. You can see straight through their head. Then on the island, we get 6 species of owl. This one here is by far the most common species. These are little burrowing owls, and they live in little families in holes in the ground. Next slide. And then over the years, we've been getting more and more of these channel bill toucans that come to visit the garden. And they come to feed on all the various fruit trees. And they can often be seen in the guarapavu trees right next to the center. And we also have many species, I'm sure over 10, of these little hummingbirds. So this is one of the species, and this one here is an adult at about 7 centimeters of length, but it's by no means the smallest one. And then we also get these rather bizarre birds known as urutaus, or in English as the patu bird. And these birds are rather bizarre in that they spend all their diurnal, all their daylight hours, totally motionless, totally camouflaged, pretending to be a stick. They don't move, they don't blink an eyelid. And then during the dusk, they come alive and they fly off, and you can normally hear them calling around about sunset into the night. But as soon as it becomes daylight again, they go back to their sedentary life of pretending to be a branch. Next slide. Right. So Florianopolis does have, several species of snake on it. There are only 2 species that are considered venomous. Most of them are totally harmless. And, even though I'm very interested in snake venoms and reptiles, I worked in herpetology for many years. I've only ever heard of one person in 20 years that's been bitten by a snake. So they're really not a problem, especially if you leave them alone. So the species on the right is known as a painted coral snake. It's the most venomous of all the coral snake species, having a very strong venom that affects the nervous system. And antivenom is produced specifically for it by the Institute of Butantan in Sao Paulo. And then another species that we get in our forest is a legendary snake in Brazil known as the jararaca. It is a kind of viper. And an interesting thing about this snake is if you were unfortunate enough to be bitten by it, one of the main effects of the venom is it causes a rapid drop in blood pressure. And the venom of the snake was actually used to create a whole class of antihypertensive medicines which lower your blood pressure, known as ACE inhibitors. And these drugs are still taken by about 14 million people today. Next slide. Okay, very commonly in our garden, we get these lizards known as the Argentinian black and white tegu. They're the largest of the lizards in South America. They're normally solitary, but the males get together for quite elaborate battles during mating season. This photo here is of a newborn one. The juveniles are very brightly colored with these beautiful kind of metallic greens and yellows. Okay, then we get many species of harmless snake, as I mentioned. And this is a very large but totally harmless snake. They get to about 2.8 meters. It's known locally as Serpiente tigra, or the tiger rat snake in English. And they are arboreal. They mostly feed on birds and rodents. And I often see them basking in the top of the carpi vines, as you can see here. And really beautiful snakes with very highly polished scales. And they're unusual amongst snakes in that they have very good eyesight. Normally snakes have very poor eyesight. So these guys are very difficult to approach because they're highly alert. And if you look at the picture on the right here, I took this many years ago with a cheap little camera. But you can see the whole of our institute reflected in the lens of the snake's eye. Next. And then, sorry for the quality of this image. I took this photograph with my cell phone one day walking in the forest. And this is one of our regular little visitors. This is a mangrove crab-eating fox. And what makes these little visitors unusual is they are really peculiar as being wild animals, and they have virtually no sense of fear of humans. Rather they're remarkably curious. So often when I'm working in the agroforestry, I'll turn around and one of these guys will be standing behind me, having a look at what I'm doing. And often they follow me when I walk through the forest.
Dale, we have 3 minutes. so sorry, terrible.
Okay, lastly, our area is full of amazing butterflies. The larvae often eat a lot of our plants. Over here, we can see a caterpillar, which is very interesting. It's originally from Acre. It's escaped out of the Amazon into the rest of the Brazil through the timber industry. This caterpillar we have to keep a close lookout for because its larva is regarded as being the most venomous of all caterpillars. In the top right-hand corner, you can see it eating the Diplopterus leaves. And then lastly, our area is surrounded by both a river and these mangrove areas, which are full of delicious seafood. I'm an avid fisherman, so I collect our seafood from the sea. And during lockdown, I managed to get most of my food from the gardens that we grow, the forest, and from the sea. So here you can see a photograph of our agroforestry area. 30 years ago, there was nothing growing there. And I want to just say in ending that, it's been a real privilege to be part of this garden for the last 20 years. Thanks to Luis and Adriana, and also to Conrad and Federica, who have also helped over the years. But it was such a blessing, to be able to grow this garden from seed. And by doing that, from growing the gardens from seed, watching the whole process through flowering, to be able to get seeds again and start new plants, really has taught me a lot about these plants. And I really regard these plants, especially these gardens, especially in times of, very strong geopolitical uncertainty. Where are we going to get our medicines and our foods even for the future? And are they really truly sustainable? So, I take growing gardens like this seriously. Not only are they very strong genetic ethnobotanical repositories, but they are. It's much better to have a living garden like this, than everything stored away in a seed bank. And having these living collections, firstly, you can eat them, you can use them as medicines, but also, people can interact with them and learn from these plants.
Okay, we don't, 2 minutes, it doesn't, so I have a whole thing about animism and ideology. But anyway, just to remind you, this is the Bible, the story of the tree. In Noé, completely forgot the plants, no plants there, only animals. The Catholic Church, they took care of cutting the sacred trees, the sacred groves. This is San Bonifacio cutting the Torah tree, and of course we have a fantastic literature nowadays. It's impossible to go through it, but anyway, we have fantastic people like Florian Köchlin, and of course our Monica, and most of us, and I have to say that until quite recently, totally plant blind. And what is plant blindness? The inability to recognize the importance of plants in the biosphere and in human affairs, the inability to appreciate the aesthetic and unique biological features of the life forms belonging to the plant kingdom, the misguided anthropocentric ranking of plants as inferior to animals, leading to the erroneous conclusion that they are unworthy of human consideration. And you see it, it's not working. Well, anyway, so the only way, I think, to experience mind in plants is to silence the human apparatus that deals with concepts and just feel, observe, listen, be open to the pure presence without self-reflection. And we have all these plants, and don't think that we are taking this and this and that. It's enough just to be there, just to see the presence. And of course, we have a completely different way of looking at the world, the Western world, subject, object, But then the shamanic way or the Amerindian way and the way of many other traditional societies is the merging of the subject and the object. So that And of course, there are the indigenous societies who have this knowledge and that we absolutely need to preserve. And in indigenous culture, everything, the nature, everything, it has words, you know. So the human voice in an oral culture is always to some extent participatory with the voices of wolves, wind, waves, participant that is with the encompassing discourse of an animated earth. There is no element of the landscape that is definitely void of expressive resonance and power. Any movement may be a gesture, any sound may be a voice, a meaningful utterance. This is from David Ebren. This is a book that I highly recommend. And so animism is to the recognition that there is mind in life, that there is subjectivity. So in these circumstances in which we are, absolutely we need animism. We have to recover animism. And how to do it? Of course, psychedelics is one of the ways, you know, that people have this kind of experiences. And so we would like to thank Conrad Fischer and Friederike Mecker, who have been working very much, the participants in our seminars, and those persons who have given us, you know, and I'm sorry to say that, you know, with 20 years, I never asked for money donations, but 2 years and a half years in the pandemic. So if any of you is interested, can help to any of the 3 projects. We have the ethnobotanical garden close to the house, the agroforestry with the fruit trees and all that, and the mountain reforestation. And perhaps this one is the most important because we have this very invasive fern that we have to, and this is labor. I mean, you have to have a lot of people just pulling out and then planting fast-growing trees. So this is it. Time for questions?
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Back here.
Really amazing talk and achievement. Struck by so many things, and I'm really glad the way that you ended it to give a sense of the animism. And I just had a question from an experience that I had in the Amazon with the Yuanawa. And they considered the Saumauma tree to be the kind of master of the ecosystem. And I saw the Lupuna, and I wondered whether that played a similar role within your garden. And I wondered if you have any rituals of your own that you conduct in the garden to have that connection with the plants.
Well, I mean, I just go to the plants. Go to the plants in silence, if possible, at all times. You know, in the evening is very interesting, just to be there, just to be there. Yes. Yeah. No, nothing special.
Next question.
Well, I just think that this is a demonstration of so many things. You know, the importance of these living collections and the way that you and Dale have arranged this so that all the life forms are there. And you can, you know, this is a living laboratory. I mean, these are rare species of plants and animals and fungi, and you can actually observe evolution in progress. You can do hybridization studies. I think the work that you showed earlier with grafting peyote onto San Pedro, I think the Native Americans should be talking to you because propagating peyote is a big problem for them, right. And they're reluctant to use any high-tech approaches, but this might really work.
And the ayahuasca, the vertical cultivation of ayahuasca, I think is very important. I hope that people will pick up this idea, you know.
Right, and the discovery about Calpari and the other Tucunacá. If this is truly a different species, then potentially there are hybridization studies. I'm wondering if you make herbarium vouchers of any of these. You should try to either systematize that, create your own herbarium, or deposit specimens in a botanical museum or something.
It would be nice to have but resources are very scarce, you know. So we have been just gradually moving, creating this. Right now we are building a little house for the cacti. The cacti they grow it's very difficult because it's very humid. So
Right.
we had San Pedro and then rotten from the roots and so on. So we are now creating a special place for the cacti, and so gradually, as we get resources, we will be able to do. Of course, it will be fantastic to have
Right.
the herbarium
It
as well.
does not have to be so expensive, and I think there are, individuals who obviously, like Frederica and Conrad, have helped to support it, but also institutions. I think you can probably interest places like the New York Botanical Garden, the Missouri Botanical Garden, other institutions.
We have to go through a
support
bureaucratic
this kind of
process,
thing.
It's a huge bureaucratic process to have it really as an official ethnobotanical garden. At the moment, it's just a witch's garden.
Right. Yeah, but the advantages, there are also advantages to that. I mean, it does constrain you, but it also allows you to create opportunities. You could have, sort of satellite facilities to established institutions. You think?
It's in the future, I hope.
Yeah, it's in the future.
Yeah.
Right. But it doesn't have to be far in the future.
No, it
You
cannot
only
be too
have
far
so
because
long left
we
and
don't
more
have many years left.
You're
Yeah.
like me. Anyway, thank you so much. That's a marvelous presentation.
Okay.